Okay, so my question was, what is a descriptive or narrative grading system? How does it compare to a letter grading system? So we've all had to deal with a letter grading system. You turn in a piece of work, teacher looks at it, compares it to a rubric, gives it a score, whatever, and it gives you an A plus or B or whatever, with A plus being the highest letter you can receive on an assignment and like an F minus being the lowest. So, a narrative grading system, after I read it and just looking at the name of it, it's basically telling a story about the student and the student's performance. Um, UC Santa Cruz used this system of grading for a while, until about 2000. And it was just described as the student's performance is described in one paragraph. The evaluation may summarize students' test scores, may comment on whether a student is working up to his or her potential, may comment on the student's writing and contributions to class discussions. And it just basically it's attempting to have a very humanistic outlook of what the student's doing in class. So basically the teacher's just writing a little report like, oh, this is how the student's doing. He's doing great on this, could be doing a little better in class discussions, whatever. So then some of the pros and cons of using either the descriptive grading system and the letter grading system are as follows. So the disadvantages of using letter grading is that system is so restrictive. You either get an A or a B or a C, that's it. It doesn't really explore how the student's doing or how far they've come over the semester or the school year. You can label students with these grades. So like, oh, Marie's an A plus student. So then you start just thinking, oh, all that Marie is gonna do is A plus work. And then you might also have the opposite where like, oh, Johnny just fails all the time. That's all he's ever gonna be able to accomplish. Also, it's not gonna work the same for two students. No student's gonna fit a cookie cutter mold. Um, it's not gonna work out that way. And it's not personal. You just kind of write a letter and that's it. That's the grade, that's what they get, done deal. It's very uniform. It doesn't take into account like students' differences and their weaknesses and their strengths and how they learn best. Um, and that these grades may take away from the actual purposes of education. So I feel like we've all had this where we'll be super nice to a teacher or um, whatever to try and get a better grade, or we'll ask them about grades, about, oh, how do I get from a B plus to an A, and you're just talking about these logistics of getting a better grade, but you're not worried about the learning. You're not educating yourself. The student's not doing their job, the teacher's not doing theirs, because they're dealing with all these grades. And then if the grades inflate or if they change frequently enough, the grades don't mean anything to the students. There are advantages to using the letter grade system. It's much more convenient than other grading methods. You just look at your rubric or your little number scale and you assign a grade. It's systematic. It just works. It functions. There's order. And in a school where life gets a little hectic, that's very needed. It's easily interpreted and understood by people outside of the school. So when kids transfer to other schools and they have their grades or their transcripts, the new school's going to be able to understand, okay, this is how they did in these classes, this is where I need to put them or whatnot. Or when they're applying to jobs or schools, colleges, whatever, people are going to understand it. Letter grades are encouraging for students. They want to get a good GPA. I feel like we've all experienced that where we want to get that A just to keep our GPA up. And it allows students to comprehend their own strengths and weaknesses. So as we're looking at our transcripts, we can kind of understand like, okay, well, I did really well in all my elementary education classes, but maybe political science isn't my strength because I got a B in that class. But that's okay because that's just not something I'm super good at. There are advantages to the narrative grading system. It represents a school's humanistic ideas and beliefs. It shows that schools are worried about who the students are becoming. They're not worried about just turning out these grades and being really efficient. They want to help these students grow and learn and become better people. It doesn't perpetuate the education model of a factory and that the school is producing similar students. It kind of like what I was saying before, it's not these schools are trying to get these kids into the classrooms, out the door, done, efficient, perfect copies of each other, ready to go. It's focused on this individual and the individual's strengths. It captures the finer details of a student and their work. So instead of like looking at the overall picture, they focus on the really good things, even the little things that you might miss with other rating systems. So they might think about, oh, like, this one student did a great job. Like, she really thought through how she was writing, or when she made this model, she was very detailed, stuff like that. It reduces students' anxiety about grades. Students aren't as worried, like, oh, like, I need to study for this test, because I have to get an A+, or else I'm going to be stuck with a B in the class. It just removes that fear. They just know to try their best, and it's all going to be okay. Evaluations allow the teachers to encourage students to think complexly. Because they know they're not giving grades, they can be like, oh, it's okay, like, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? And they can kind of have this dialogue going where they're talking about these issues, and the teachers and the students aren't worried about meeting these grades or these rubrics or whatever. There are disadvantages to the system. It's great for slackers, for the students who just don't want to put in the time or the effort. They can just show up and they know that, well, I'm not going to get an F. Like, I'm doing something. Like, if I'm just a little bit better than I was yesterday, I'm progressing. No letter grade equals problems for students who are trying to apply to school's employment. So if we were in a school like that where we didn't have a transcript, it would be so hard to apply for jobs. Like, how are you supposed to present these evaluation forms and expect to be hired? They're not going to be able to go through all these reports from your professors. Like, they're really helpful and they're probably very well done, but they're not efficient. It's not an efficient way for students for employers or school admission committees to understand. Makes the school look non-rigorous or hippie-ish. And this is something that UC Santa Cruz dealt with a lot when they were trying to change their program, was that some people will take this grading system the wrong way. Be like, oh, well, it's not rigorous, they're not pushing the kids enough, they're not trying hard enough, whatever. And that's best, like, the best case scenario, that people see them as non-rigorous. And worst case scenario, they see them as hippies, like, super kind of weird, kind of out there, whatnot. It's lots of work for the teachers to complete these evaluations. Just imagine having 30 students and having to, like, write 2 pages for each student, and that's your grading, like, for finals week. It would be insane, and you're trying to do a good job and, be meaningful, but you don't really have the time. The whole point of the narrative grading system is to kind of do away with the qualitative ABC or the 100%, 90%, 80% testing, but the narratives still use test scores. So you're still giving students these tests, multiple choice tests, whatever, and you're still like, oh, on the midterm, Susie got an A+, but on the final, she got a B. You're still using that data anyway. And then it just produces inch-thick transcripts, which is daunting for anyone, employers and school admission committees, to look at. Like, how would you feel if you were trying to hire someone and you receive this, like, folder full of their transcripts? But it wasn't just a concise little transcript you get from the registrar's office. It's this, a 2-page paper by every single professor they've ever had about their performance. So that's a little crazy. So those are the disadvantages and advantages for both the narrative grading system and the letter grading system.